My ex-wife demanded my kids share their $180,000 college fund with her 4 stepchildren. But when she sued me for child support, the judge destroyed her in court and warned she could lose custody for emotional manipulation. I'm 42 years old. I work in commercial construction, and what happened with my ex a few years ago almost destroyed me. Not just me, but my kids too. I guess I should start at the beginning. When Vanessa and I got divorced about 11 years ago, when Victoria was 7 and Austin was 5. It wasn't a horrible divorce. You know, there wasn't screaming or fighting over every single plate. We just realized we didn't work as a couple anymore. What we did have clear, crystal clear, was that our kids were going to be okay, that they weren't going to lack anything, and that we were both going to keep being their parents no matter what happened between us. Since Victoria was born, I started saving for college. My dad could never pay for my college, and I had to work while I studied. And honestly, it was brutal. Like there were days when I had to choose between eating or buying the books I needed for classes. I didn't want that for my kids, you know what I mean? So every month, without fail, I put money into savings accounts for them. It wasn't much at first, maybe $100 monthly for each one, but it was something. When Austin was born, I did the same thing, and for years I kept that pattern, increasing the amounts when I could, never skipping a month even when things were tight financially. Then something happened that, looking back, was a blessing in disguise, even though at the time I didn't feel that way. About 8 years ago, I had an accident at work. I fell from scaffolding and destroyed my back. I was in rehab for like 6 months, and it was a nightmare of pain and frustration. But the company gave me a settlement, and it was like $120,000 after the lawyers took their cut. Most of that money went straight into Victoria and Austin's college accounts, divided equally between the two. Vanessa knew about this. I mean, it wasn't a secret. She was there during my recovery even though we were already divorced, and she even helped me, with the kids, when I couldn't even walk properly. 3 years later, my Aunt Magdalena died. She was my mom's sister and never married or had kids, and she left me an inheritance of like $80,000. It was a total shock because I didn't even know she had that much money saved. She lived super simple in a small apartment and never indulged in luxuries. Again, that money went to Victoria and Austin, $40,000 for each one straight into their college funds. At that point, they already had pretty significant amounts saved, like each one had around $90,000, and I kept adding every month what I could. The idea was that when college time came, they could go wherever they wanted, without worrying about student debt that follows you for decades. Vanessa remarried about 6 years ago to Jordan, a guy who works in used car sales or something like that. Jordan had 2 kids from a previous marriage, a boy and a girl who were already teenagers when he and Vanessa got married, and then the two of them had 2 more kids together really quickly, one after another. Suddenly, Vanessa went from having 2 kids to having 6 in her house, well, 4 permanently, because mine came and went with the shared custody agreement we had, which was basically 50-50, 1 week with me and 1 week with her. Things started getting weird about 3 years ago. Vanessa called me one day and said we needed to talk about money, and I thought maybe there was some extra expense for the kids or something medical they needed. We met at a Starbucks near her house. She showed up with Jordan, which already seemed strange to me because normally we talked just the 2 of us about Victoria and Austin stuff. They sat across from me, and Vanessa started with this talk about how things were difficult financially in their house, that with 6 kids the expenses were enormous, that Jordan barely made enough to cover everything. I nodded, like, yeah, I can imagine it's not easy, but waiting to see where all this was going. Then Jordan dropped the bomb. He said, basically, that they were thinking it would be fair if I started paying child support for Victoria and Austin, so they could use the money they normally spent on my kids to save for college for the other 4 children in the house. He said it just like that, casual, like it was the most logical thing in the world. I sat there processing what I had just heard, and I asked them why the hell would I pay child support if we had 50-50 shared custody and I already paid my half of everything the kids needed. Vanessa started with how technically they spent more time at her house because she was more flexible with schedules and that I worked a lot of hours, which was basically a lie because I adjusted my schedule specifically to have my full week with them. I told them no, that I definitely wasn't going to pay child support when I was already fulfilling all my responsibilities and more. Jordan got kind of annoyed, and said I was selfish, that I was only thinking about my two kids and not about the whole family, like as if I had any responsibility for his kids or for the two babies they decided to have. The conversation got tense and I got up and left, but I could see Vanessa was frustrated. I thought that was the end of it, but like a month later, Vanessa called me again. This time she got straight to the point. She told me she knew I had large college funds for Victoria and Austin, and that she and Jordan had been talking and they thought the fair thing would be to divide that money among the 6 kids in the family. I mean, take the funds I had been building for years specifically for my 2 kids and distribute them equally among Victoria, Austin, and the other 4 kids who had nothing to do with me. I was literally speechless for a moment, and then I exploded. I told her she was completely crazy. If she thought I was going to take the money I had saved for years, that came from my work, injury, and my aunt's inheritance, and give it to kids who weren't even mine. Vanessa started with the speech about how they were all siblings, that Victoria and Austin loved their brothers and step-siblings, that it was important that everyone had the same opportunities. And yeah, my kids loved the other kids. That was never in doubt. But that didn't mean I had to finance the college education of all of them. I told her very clearly, "Listen to me, Vanessa. That money is for Victoria and Austin. Period. End of discussion. Don't bring up this topic again, because the answer is always going to be no." She hung up furious and didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks, only communicated by text when it was absolutely necessary about the kids' schedules, but it didn't end there. Vanessa started working on Victoria. My daughter was like 15 at the time, almost 16, and one day she came to me during her week and looked super distressed. She sat at the kitchen table and told me she needed to talk to me about something important. I sat with her and asked what was wrong, and she started crying. She told me her mom had been talking to her about the college money, that she had told her it was selfish to have so much money saved when her younger siblings had nothing, that she should want to share with them because they were family. Victoria told me she felt horrible, that she didn't know if she was a bad person for wanting to use her money for her own education. I hugged her and explained the whole situation, told her that money was hers, that I had saved it specifically for her since before she could walk, that it came from my work and my family, and that she had no moral obligation to share it with anyone. I told her it was completely normal and right for her to want to go to college without debt, that it didn't make her selfish at all. I could see the relief on her face, but also the confusion, because her mom was telling her one thing and I was saying something completely different. The next day I went looking for Vanessa. I called her and told her we had to meet immediately. We met at the same Starbucks as before, but this time it was just me and her, no Jordan. I told her very clearly that if she brought Victoria into this again, if she made her feel guilty again for wanting to use the money that was legitimately hers, we were going to have serious problems. Vanessa got defensive and said she was just trying to teach Victoria about the importance of family and sharing. I told her that was garbage, that what she was doing was emotional manipulation, and that Victoria didn't have to justify or feel guilty about having a college fund that her father had built for her. Vanessa got angry and told me I had always been controlling with money, that during our marriage I made all the financial decisions, which was partially true, but also because I was the one earning most of the money and paying the bills. I reminded her that when we got divorced, everything was divided equally, that she kept half of everything and I kept the other half, that I didn't owe her anything beyond my responsibility to our kids. The conversation went nowhere, and we both left, frustrated. But things got worse. Austin, who was like 13, started having problems at school. His grades dropped, and his teacher called me because they had found him crying in the bathroom during recess. When I talked to Austin, he told me that at his mom's house, Jordan and Vanessa constantly talked about money, about how they didn't have enough for the other kids, about how it was unfair that Victoria and Austin had so much while their siblings had nothing. Austin told me he felt guilty all the time, that he felt it was his fault that the other kids couldn't have things, and that sometimes Jordan made comments about how he and Victoria were privileged. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I called Vanessa and told her that if this didn't stop immediately, I was going to seek full custody of the kids. I told her she was psychologically damaging Austin, that Victoria was already in therapy because she didn't know how to handle the pressure they were putting on her, and that I wasn't going to allow this to continue. Vanessa got hysterical and said I couldn't take her kids away, that she was a good mother, that I was exaggerating. I told her she could be a good mother, but what she was doing wasn't being a good mother, that this was putting her financial problems above the emotional well-being of our kids. There was peace for a while, like 3 months where everything seemed to go back to normal. The kids were better. Austin stopped crying and his grades improved. Victoria seemed less stressed. I thought Vanessa had finally gotten the message, but then Jordan called me directly, something he had never done before. He told me they needed financial help, that they'd had unexpected expenses with one of the babies who had been sick, and if I could lend them, like $5,000, that they would pay me back in monthly payments. I told him I was sorry about the baby, but no, that I wasn't a bank and they needed to solve their financial problems without involving me. Jordan got upset and started saying I had a lot of money saved, doing nothing, that it was ridiculous that I didn't want to help when I could easily do it. I told him that money wasn't doing nothing. It was specifically designated for my children's education, and that it wasn't my problem that he and Vanessa had decided to have more kids than they could comfortably support. I know it sounded harsh, but I was fed up, like they'd been at this for years and didn't understand I wasn't going to give in. Jordan told me I was selfish, that I only thought about myself, that Victoria and Austin were going to realize someday what kind of person I was. I hung up on him because the conversation wasn't going anywhere productive. But like a week later, Victoria came to my house crying. Again. Vanessa had confronted her directly and had demanded that she sign something, like a letter or document where Victoria agreed to share her college fund with her siblings. Victoria showed me the paper. It was something Vanessa had written by hand, super informal, but basically said that Victoria voluntarily wanted to share her educational funds with her younger siblings. Victoria told me her mom had told her that if she really loved her siblings, she would sign it. That it was just a paper, but it meant a lot. That it showed she was a good person and a good older sister. Victoria didn't sign it. She came straight to me with the paper, but she was emotionally devastated. She said, "Dad, am I a bad person for not wanting to sign this? Don't I love my siblings enough?" And seeing my 16-year-old daughter questioning whether she was a bad person because she wanted to go to college without debt broke my heart and infuriated me at the same time. That night, I sent Vanessa a long text message. I told her what she had done was unacceptable, that she had crossed a line there was no coming back from, that manipulating a teenager into signing documents about money was emotional abuse. I told her if she did anything remotely similar to this again, I was going to contact my lawyer and we were going to court for full custody. I also told her I was going to document all of this in case we needed evidence in the future. Vanessa responded that I was being dramatic, that she was just trying to teach Victoria values, but I think she finally understood I was serious about the legal consequences. Everything was relatively calm for a few more months. I thought maybe, finally, this was over. But then I got a court notification. Vanessa had filed a motion for child support, claiming she was the primary caregiver of Victoria and Austin, and that I wasn't contributing adequately to their expenses. I was stunned because we had 50-50 custody, legally documented, and I paid my half of absolutely everything: medical, dental, extracurricular activities, clothes, everything. I had receipts and account statements from years proving this. I hired a lawyer, which cost me a fortune, but I had no choice. My lawyer reviewed all the documentation and told me Vanessa's case was weak, that it was obvious she was trying to get additional money without real legal basis. We prepared all the evidence. The custody records showing exactly 50-50 time with each parent, the bank records showing all my payments, even testimonies from the kids' teachers confirming I was equally involved in their education as Vanessa. The hearing was like a year and a half ago. Vanessa arrived with Jordan and her lawyer. I arrived with mine. Vanessa testified, saying she did more for the kids, that I worked a lot and wasn't really present, that she was the one who went to all the medical appointments and school meetings. My lawyer presented evidence showing I had gone to exactly the same number of medical appointments and school meetings as her in the last 2 years. We had emails and appointment confirmations that proved it. We also presented bank records showing I contributed equally to all expenses. The judge listened to everything and then called Victoria to testify. She was almost 18 by then. Victoria told the judge she spent exactly the same amount of time with each parent, that both were equally involved in her life, and that her dad, meaning me, had always been financially responsible. The judge asked her directly if she had ever lacked anything, while with me and Victoria said no, never. Then the judge asked Victoria if anyone had pressured her about money or college funds, and Victoria hesitated but then told the truth, that her mom had tried to make her share her college fund with her siblings. Vanessa's face, when Victoria said that, was total shock. Vanessa's lawyer tried to make it seem like Victoria was confused or misinterpreting the conversations, but Victoria held firm. She said she loved all her siblings but didn't understand why she was expected to pay for their college when each one had different parents who should be responsible for that. The judge took notes and then asked Vanessa directly if it was true that she had tried to get Victoria to sign a document about sharing her college fund. Vanessa admitted it, but said it was just to teach her about sharing and family. The judge didn't look happy. He asked about the other 4 kids in Vanessa's house, and she explained 2 were Jordan's from a previous marriage and 2 were hers and Jordan's together. The judge asked why Jordan wasn't saving for his own kids from his first marriage, and why they weren't saving for the 2 they had together. Vanessa started with excuses about expenses and financial difficulties, but the judge basically told her that her decisions to have a large family weren't my financial responsibility. The judge ruled completely in my favor. He said the 50-50 custody arrangement would remain as it was, that there was no basis for child support given that both parents shared time and responsibilities equally, and that the college funds I had established for Victoria and Austin were my property and my exclusive decision on how they were used. He also gave Vanessa a warning about trying to manipulate the kids with financial matters, saying that could be considered emotional abuse, and that if he received more complaints about it, we could come back to court to reevaluate custody. I left that court feeling a mix of relief and total exhaustion. I had won, but the process had been horrible and expensive, both financially and emotionally. Victoria hugged me outside the courthouse and said, "Thank you, Dad, for protecting us." Austin, who was like 15 by then, was also there and looked relieved that it was all over. After that, things changed. Vanessa and Jordan stopped asking me for money, stopped mentioning the college funds, basically, stopped creating drama about the whole financial thing. I don't know if it was because the judge scared them or because they finally understood it wasn't going to work, but they stopped. The relationship between Vanessa and me is cordial now, but cold. We talk only what's necessary about the kids and nothing more. The kids still go 50-50 between the 2 houses and seem to be better now that there isn't that constant pressure about money. Victoria just started college last semester. She chose a good university, not the most expensive but not cheap either, and can pay for it completely with her fund without needing loans. She sent me a photo like a month ago of her in her dorm room, smiling, with a text that said, "Thank you for making this possible, Dad." Austin is in his last year of high school and is already looking at universities, also without worrying about how he's going to pay because he knows he has his fund waiting for him. Sometimes I think about everything we went through these last few years, and I wonder if I could have handled things differently, if I was too hard on Vanessa, or if I should have tried to help more. But at the end of the day, I did what I had to do to protect my kids and their future. That money was for them, only for them, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even their mother, take it away or make them feel guilty for having it. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything, except maybe standing firmer earlier before Victoria and Austin had to go through so much emotional stress. Last week, Victoria called me from college. She told me one of her roommates had to leave school because they couldn't pay, and their student loans were already too much. She said, "Dad, thank you for thinking about my future since before I could understand what it meant. That made it all worth it. Like all the fights, all the difficult moments, all the tension. My kids are going to be able to start their adult lives without huge debts chasing them, and that's the only thing I ever wanted for them."